My name is Pedro Galindo. I also go by Pete, and I am a teacher on special assignment for El Monte City School District, supporting K-8 teachers with math instruction.
And hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Alejandra Hoff. I actually go by Alex, and I'm also a teacher on special assignment for the El Monte City School District. And I support K-8 teachers with math, but I have a position where I also support teachers in the area of language arts and everything in between.
So welcome to our presentation on promoting equity in math through discourse and community. To kick things off, we would like for you to please type your job title in the chat box so we get a sense of who our audience is. And if you support teachers with math instruction, if you could please indicate the grade levels you work with. And in your judgment, if you could please share with us what you believe to be the number one obstacle / barrier to improving math outcomes for students. There's my chat. All right, got a couple responses from you. Problem solving, yeah. High quality curriculum, definitely. The perception of how math should be taught, for sure. Okay. Word problems, yes. Teacher confidence in math instruction, that's another one for sure.
Yeah, the barrier between how we learned and how we're expected to teach it now. Yeah. Thank you for all of your responses. Pete, if it's okay, we're going to move along.
Yeah.
So in case you have never heard of us in El Monte, it's a city in the eastern part of LA County, and we're really close to Baldwin Park. And Baldwin Park is well known for the birthplace of In-N-Out. So if you love In-N-Out, it was born in Baldwin Park. And speaking in California terms, El Monte is close to where the 10 and the 605 meet. In our district, we have about 8,300 students, and we serve students from TK to 8th grade, 93% of which are on free or reduced lunch, and 32% of our students are English language learners. Hispanic students make up about 80% of our population, and Asian students make up about 18%.
So with that said, we'd like to share with you a little bit about our own teaching trajectory. I'll go first and give you a little bit about my teaching background. Prior to becoming a TOSA, I taught 8th grade math for 10 years. And I would describe my teaching approach as typical to how most math classes are set up. You got your warm up and homework review at the beginning. From there, I would give the lessons straight from the textbook, and the students would copy the examples into their notebooks. And afterwards, I would assign the independent work pages that followed the lesson. Sounds familiar, right? In addition to sticking to the textbook, I was also a huge proponent of the drill and kill worksheets. I ended up creating my very own set of worksheets that covered every possible discrete math skill you could ever think of. And I was totally thrilled when I discovered Khan Academy, and I made that a big part of my class. And as is common in many middle schools, my classes were leveled. My school would organize the math classes based on how the students scored on the CST, which was the precursor to the SBAC. So with 6 total classes, one class consisted of all of the students who, quote, exceeded standards. This was my geometry, later my integrated math 1 class. 2 of my classes consisted of all the students who, quote, met the standards. 2 classes consisted of all the students who were, quote, below standards. And 1 class consisted of all the students who were, quote, far below standards. Of course, there were exceptions based on scheduling conflicts, so there was some slight mixing of students between ranges. But this is all to say that with how my classes were set up, I got a really good window into how different students at, quote, different achievement levels engage with mathematics. Fast forward to today, where as a TOSA, I now work with students of all different grade levels, from kindergarten all the way up to grade 8. And based on my classroom experiences as an 8th grade math teacher, I knew that from the moment I started as a TOSA, I had to make sense of how math was being taught from the very beginning. And so this meant visiting many elementary classrooms, because I saw firsthand how, quote, unprepared many students were for grade 8 math. But even more disturbing was how many carried a fear or outright distaste of math. So I would start every year by asking my students to draw for me a picture that represented their feelings towards mathematics in what is called a disposition drawing. And I'd like to share with you some of those drawings with you today. Show me a thumbs up if you can see my screen. All right, thank you. So I'm just going to quietly share with you some of these drawings that the students produced. Again, this is a window into their psychology of how they think about math. Feel free to post some of your ideas to the chat. Thank you, Laura. Yeah, this is quite a window into their view, into their worldview about math. This is a common theme, as a lot of students will portray a very healthy picture at the beginning, and then slowly over time things get darker and darker. And another common theme is like a theme of confusion, but at the same time this feeling of having to be successful. If you do get a chance to work with math teachers, I highly recommend this activity to do at the very beginning of the year and also at the end of the year, to hopefully see a change in disposition. Let me just kind of quickly get through the end here. So thank you for those of you who posted some of your ideas into the chat. And just based on this, I'd like to kind of share with you that my professional goal really is to figure out how we can turn this around. How can we portray a more positive picture of math for students? Well, over the past several years, and with the support of my colleague, I think we've been able to come up with a pretty clear pathway on how we can accomplish this. But before we lay that out to you, let me pass the baton over to my colleague to share her story.
All right, so mine's a little different. I am more lower elementary. I've taught kinder, second, third, and I taught 6th grade, but that's actually a year that I want to forget because 6th grade was not my friend. But I lived in more lower elementary than Pete. And I taught in California, and I've taught in Arizona. And then I taught for 5 years in a charter school system. So it was during this time in charter school system that I became really good at small group instruction. And I consider myself to be really good at small group instruction. And I've spent a lot of my time filling holes and, just like Pete said, making my own worksheets and like really knowing what the kids needed to learn to pass the CST or to get really good at the CST. I got really good at beating the CST basically. And I spent a lot of time doing that. And then I had my first child. And that's when I moved to El Monte School District. And that was when I started thinking about how I want my own children to experience school and to experience math. How would I want my children to think about math instead of just this drill and kill, beat the test kind of mentality? And that's when my teaching kind of evolved and took on a different form to where I embraced more of the CGI structure that Pete is talking about. And before we move on, I also do want to say that there is so much value in small group instruction, and it is a part of the puzzle. And I don't consider it to be a waste of time. I think it's a very good use of time. It's just a small part of the puzzle. And I also want to point out that I am a first-year TOSA, so my evolution as an educator and as a TOSA is evolving. But Pete has been gracious enough to kind of take me under his wing and show me more of this CGI process that I know a lot about, but I am consistently, I guess I'm evolving my own practice. So that's kind of how I came to be here in this meet.
Great. Oops, I forgot these 2 slides here. Of course, we all know the experiences of last year doing online learning. So that was a whole different ball game altogether.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird time to join the TOSA world.
Yeah.
I haven't really been around the other TOSAs very much, and I've been pretty much completely online. And since I do miss the classroom so much, I am teaching kindergarten for summer school. So that's kind of me stepping back in the classroom for the summer. So thank you for allowing me to share.
And our partnership extends well beyond this first year. I've known Alex since she first started in our district and know her to be an outstanding teacher. So it really is with great pleasure and joy that she's a part of this presentation. So to move along, we're going to frame our presentation around the concept of trust in the way it was presented by Professor Frances Fry in her TED Talk that was shared at the beginning of our last session. If you remember, she outlines 3 components of trust: empathy, logic, and authenticity. So as coaches, we both recognize how important trust is in our work. So her talk really resonated with us because it helps to frame our overall approach to coaching. And it begins with empathy.
And based on both of our classroom experiences, Pete and I operate from a sense of both urgency and empathy. So we know firsthand that there are so many challenges and constraints that teachers face on a daily basis. And we know what that pressure is like. We know how difficult it is to find time to plan and prepare, and we know that burden. So our coaching philosophy begins with knowing that teachers need immediate and empathetic support.
The second corner of the trust triangle is logic. And our primary objective as instructional coaches is really to train, guide, and support teachers with the instructional strategies that maximize student learning and socio-emotional outcomes. So the first step in coaching is to identify and learn about what those best practices are. In our case, when it comes to math, we have discovered and embraced cognitively guided instruction, or CGI, which is basically student-centered mathematics. With over 30 years of research and implemented across the country, this approach has a proven record of maximizing student outcomes in math. These are a few of the books that embody the logic to the approach. The ones highlighted here on the left are the 2 main books that represent the theoretical foundation for CGI. And if you've never heard about this strategy before and you would like to learn more, the first step is to get your hands on these books. They're easy to read through and provide you with a way to get started. And again, super, super helpful books. This book, Intentional Talk, is a great support to the CGI strategy because it gives teachers the specific tools for generating student discourse. And this book here, 5 Practices for Orchestrating Productive Mathematics Instruction, is really great for taking the underlying concept of CGI and applying it with older students, since CGI is primarily geared towards elementary. We've also partnered with UCLA Math Project to train our teachers, and their support has been vital and really fantastic. CGI is built on the following logic. Students are hardwired to make sense of mathematics. They are curious and natural problem solvers. Instead of spoon feeding students with facts, steps, and procedures, we can strategically present activities that allow them to build number sense and problem solving skills more naturally. And we do this by posing carefully selected tasks and ask questions that make them think critically. We invite students to engage with each other's ideas, and we also find ways to connect conversations to their personal and shared experiences. And with time, students begin to move towards a more efficient and advanced way of thinking about mathematics. This is one of the frameworks laid out in the CGI framework, is that you have students that are at all these different ability levels in terms of the way they solve problems. But by engaging with each other on a frequent basis, they all tend to gravitate towards the more efficient number fact strategy. So on the contrary, when students are just taught to memorize facts and procedures, they end up learning math at a superficial level and making it easy for them to forget or to mix up essential concepts. Here's a quick example. 300 take away 299. This is a problem highlighted in the first CGI book, Children's Mathematics. This problem was presented to a classroom of 6th graders who were learning math in a non-CGI way. And 72% of those students did the following. They performed the standard algorithm, which we've all been trained and programmed to do. When you give that same exact problem to a group of 4th graders in a CGI classroom, 76% of those students immediately recognize the difference as one. Now, there's so much more to unpack with this teaching strategy. And again, if you've never heard of this before, I encourage you to get your hands on those books, Children's Mathematics and Extending Children's Mathematics.
So for the purpose of our presentation, we want to highlight one key aspect to this approach, and it has to do with equity. Equity is one of the major themes proposed in the California framework. And we're going to read from the framework itself here. A fundamental aim of this framework is to respond to issues of inequity in mathematics learning. Equity influences all aspects of this document. All students, regardless of background, language of origin, differences, or foundational knowledge, are capable and deserving of depth of understanding and engagement in rich mathematics tasks. That is from the math framework itself. And as you may recall, at the beginning of the presentation, Pete was sharing with you how when he taught math, he taught it in leveled math classes. And those of you who have taught similar classes or your district does this, know that when the classes are leveled, you can see that racial disparities appear. So in a school where the vast majority of the students are Hispanics, Hispanics are never the majority in the advanced math class. So this is a major problem. And for this reason, equity must be at front and center when it comes to mathematics. And although racial equity is a major part of the conversation, it is important to talk about equity as it relates to students with so-called learning disabilities. So we wanted to highlight a short video that helps emphasize this aspect.
Neurological differences like autism or ADHD are considered to be dysfunctional disorders and disabilities under the medical model of mental health. There's too little attention given to enabling people with neurologically different minds to be accepted for themselves, to discover and celebrate their strengths, and to find a place in society that values their differences. When most of us think of diversity, we think of things like race or sexual orientation, but there's a different kind of diversity you might not know about, neurodiversity. Neurodiversity is the concept that neurological differences among people should be recognized and respected. I believe it's time for this new social movement, the neurodiversity movement, to take off. Neurodiversity is a part of our genetics and of our evolution as a species. The genes for autism and ADHD are not errors, but rather are the result of variations in the human genome that have and will continue to have advantages for society. One of the genes associated with ADHD, the DRD4 gene, is known as the novelty-seeking gene. It arrived on the human evolutionary scene over 10,000 years ago. Genes associated with autism also go back more than 10,000 years. Research suggests that genetic variants linked to autism might have been positively selected during human evolution because they contributed to exceptional memory skills, heightened perception in vision, taste, and smell, a precise eye for detail, and an enhanced understanding of systems such as animal behavior. These characteristics likely remain in the gene pool today because they are still advantageous. As a psychologist advising the parents of differently wired kids, I tell parents they have a choice between trying to change the child to fit the environment and changing the environment to fit the child. There are many different microhabitats and subcultures in our world. For an individual with autism or ADHD, finding success on their own terms may come from discovering the particular niche that fits best, the niche that allows their strengths to shine and their challenges to be minimized. Individuals with ADHD tend to thrive in situations of rapid change, variety, and that reward creativity and out-of-the-box thinking. A career as a comedian, detective, entrepreneur, journalist, actor, EMT technician, or photographer could be. I'm not saying that having autism or ADHD is easy. And I don't mean to downplay the real suffering that can be caused by having a neurodevelopmental condition, disability, or difference. But it's also time the world sees the beauty and value in brain differences. Neurodiversity might be every bit as crucial for the human race as biodiversity is for life in general. My vision is for a neurodiversity tolerant and accepting society where differences are celebrated for the depth and dimension they bring to the human condition. I want children whose brains are wired differently to be encouraged to find their niche instead of changing to fit other people's ideas of normal. Diversity in every sense makes our world a better place, and people who think differently are a huge part of that.
Right. Yes, agreed. Powerful video. And Laura, what a wonderful quote that you just shared. When a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. Very, very well put.
And we believe equity is built into CGI because we focus on what students can do. So it's an asset-based pedagogy. So it's different from the more common deficit-based approach, which sounds a little bit like this. And we're going to do some bad acting here.
All right, Alex, let's look at the diagnostic results to see what we need to focus on this year.
Wow, they really scored low on measurement and data again. We need to really focus more on that.
Well, most likely they don't know their basic facts, so we'll need to really hit that hard again.
Oh man, that SBAC has so many text-based problems. How can we expect students to succeed if they can barely read?
Okay, I'll work with all the low students to cover the basics. And since you're the math genius, you take all of the high students.
So does that conversation sound familiar to you guys? So with a strategy like CGI, we flip it upside down. So first, you already know that your students have varying abilities, right? That's always going to be the case. So instead of focusing on what students can't do, you then identify what students can do. And we look to see what the students are capable of doing by using low floor and high ceilings activities. High ceiling activities that they're all capable of engaging with. So as students engage with these activities, we take note of what their strengths are. And then that also includes learning about them and their own personal experiences and their cultural experiences. But the most important point to CGI is also that it builds community among the students. So a major feature of CGI is getting students to talk and engage with each other as much as possible. So CGI creates an environment where students feel comfortable sharing their ideas, where they feel safe and engaging in critique and argument, and where they can share their own perspectives and personal experiences with each other as it applies to math. So in a environment that students have not been allowed to do this, have not been a part of regular school, it's more important than ever to try to do this CGI approach in math so students can have a chance to get to know each other and build community. So as students or as teachers get to know their students more, they can be more strategic in presenting activities and problems that are relatable and within their reach. So students work as a community and reach common understanding of how problems can be solved. So some teacher talk moves, such as like, what is a quesadilla? And has anyone ever made a quesadilla before? So just trying to activate prior knowledge and just get students thinking about something they might already be familiar with, and also reducing that anxiety level that comes with math and when it's time to do math. Another thing to ask is who can explain the problem in their own way? Does anyone have a different way to solve the problem? How many of you agree with how Pedro solved the problem? Or Than, can you describe in your own words how Pedro solved the problem? And how is it similar to the way he solved it? Or how is it different? Or even, does anyone have a compliment for Pedro? So these questions spark rich academic conversations. And over time, these conversations build that community and sense of belonging for our students. And in these classrooms, students know that their ideas and strategies and experiences will be recognized and validated by their teachers, but also by their classmates. And while we focus this strategy in math, the idea of promoting discourse has implications across all subject areas. And I think it's already been brought up in the chat, right? This is good for ELA and science, where students are expected to engage in arguments and provide claims and evidence. And also engaging students in daily and active conversations, you also maximize language outcomes for English language learners. So this CGI strategies and CGI as a whole has implications for other subjects, not just math. And also by validating students' ideas, opinions, and experiences, you create that environment where students feel safe and that social emotional well-being where students may not have been a part of for the last year. I like to call it like giving them that dopamine that they need, that dopamine hit to feel good and feel like they're a part of something in their classroom. So that is the logic behind our approach. But how do you prove that it works? So that's where the final principle of trust comes into play. And I'll hand it over to Pete.
So having defined the empathy and the logic corners of the trust triangle, now we got to talk about authenticity. So to convey authenticity, Alex and I take a proactive role in our support of teachers, and that means getting into their classrooms as often as possible. Not simply to observe or provide feedback to their lessons, but to actively demonstrate best practices by rolling up our sleeves and doing the heavy lifting for teachers to observe themselves. Professional development is a major part of what we do as TOSAs, but to really drive the point home to make CGI, quote, authentic, we find that it's necessary to actively demonstrate what the strategies look like with their own students. Getting into classrooms was tricky at first, and we often had to start with teachers who we already knew. In my case, Alex was one of those teachers. Thank you, Alex, for letting me in your classroom so many times. And the key to our classroom visits is never to come in with a judgmental view. Teachers can be very apprehensive about visitors, especially those who come from, quote, the district. In light of this, we find that it's important to assure teachers that they do not need to do anything except observe. We come in fully prepared to do the lesson, which also helps give the teacher a bit of a break, and this alone makes you an instant ally. We see teachers as partners in learning, growing with them, because CGI is both art and science, and it's important for teachers to see what it looks like firsthand. Teachers benefit from seeing how simple activities combined with basic talk moves activate lively mathematical conversations that engage all learners. And one of the most common comments I get when I do my lessons is, hey, I've never seen Samantha participate like that before. Or, Stephen usually never does anything. I did not expect him to be able to do that. So allow us to share a quick example of what this looks like during the distance learning time. Here's an activity that I call Build a Number. So again, and just to give you a quick little glimpse into what one of these activities looks like, and more importantly, how this engages students in conversation. Activities called Build a Number. I showed you all the different ways you can build a 7 or make a 7. Now, how could you make a 24? Let's start with Jacob.
I'm going to say at least 3 ways I think you can.
I want you just to tell me your coolest way to make a 24. Okay? Just your coolest way.
I just get a paper.
We're just listening to Jacob right now. Jacob, tell us what's one way you can make or you can build a 24.
Well, you can build it by also doing 24 times 1 because that makes 24.
Did you say 20 times 1?
24 times 1.
I'm sorry. You said 24 times 1. I'll write your name up here, Jacob. Thank you so much. And boys and girls, can you join your fingers together if you agree with Jacob? And if you disagree, you can break them apart like that. All right, Jacob, looks like everybody agrees with you. Who has another idea? Jocelyn, what's another way to build a 24?
12 times 2.
Let me ask the class if they agree with you. Join your fingers together if you agree with Jocelyn. All right. Looks like everybody agrees with you. Does anybody have thank you, Jocelyn. Does anybody have another way to make a 24? And I think I see Logan showing me thumbs up. Logan, what's another way we could build a 24?
25 minus 1.
I'm going to pause it there just in the interest of time. I'm going to move it towards the end just to kind of let you see kind of the finished product. This is like what you would consider to be a warm-up activity, which we call as a number sense routine, just getting the kids to think of different ways to break apart numbers. And the point here is that you're engaging as many kids as possible in the activity, and you're making their thinking visible to all of the other students. And then whenever possible, you're trying to make connections with with the different representations. So for example, Yina showed 4 times 6 as a way to make 24. And then asking Joy to come up with another way, she made a connection with repeated addition. And so I was able to capture that on my notebook. But again, in the interest of time, I need to kind of move through. We're almost done here. But that's just a little glimpse into how an activity, very, very low floor, high ceiling activity, can engage multiple learners in active discourse. All right.
All right. So it is easy to gather a group of teachers in a room and train them on a specific strategy, but actually implementing the strategies you share can be really challenging for some teachers. So for many teachers, once they get back to their classroom, they go back to sticking to the algorithm, the worksheets, and the time tests because that's comfortable. They've done it for years, and that's what they need to stick with. And that's how we were taught math too. So not like to knock anybody, it's just how we were taught. But this approach tends to widen the inequities because students never activate the full potential, their full potential. And sticking to algorithms and worksheets leaves you with only the superficial understanding and tends to leave out the divergent thinkers. So over time, by providing direct classroom support, teachers begin to see you as an ally and not hesitate to reach out to you for support. And for me personally, as a new TOSA, this is very important to me. I am actively trying to gain teachers' trust and being realistic that it doesn't happen overnight, but trust takes time, right? I'm actively working, so they're more likely to try the strategy that I am presenting, but they're also willing to ask questions because their anxiety over asking about a PD is gone because they trust me more. So by taking a proactive role, we as coaches benefit also by keeping our teaching abilities sharp. However, more importantly, we also benefit by getting to practice what we preach. This also allows us for the next round of professional development to be more confident because we have practiced what we've preached. Because when you're leading a professional development, trust and respect is everything. And if you don't have that in place, it doesn't matter how well you've crafted your presentation and how cool it looks. Without trust, your message may fall flat. So we're going to move on here.
We're gonna wrap it up. I know we're getting towards the end, but I want to finish with a short anecdote, and it is from a task that I gave a bunch of 7th graders called Miguel's milkshakes. So a few years ago, I was demonstrating a lesson for a 7th grade teacher, and just like when I was in the classroom, this teacher taught leveled math classes. She had her low, high, and medium group, and just like when I was in the classroom, I would notice the same exact thing. And maybe some of you who also were teaching can relate to this. But in all of the middle and high classes, when I presented this task, which is basically to figure out what the better deal is, and if you're going to be making a bunch of milkshakes and you need to buy a lot of milk, what's the best deal? Almost all the students in the middle and high classes were just programmed to immediately compute the unit rate. But in the quote low class, right, the class where all the students are marked as not meeting standards, the most elegant explanation was given. As soon as I presented this first question, what's the better deal? A spunky little 7th grader explained with total confidence that the 2 gallons for $5.98 was the better deal, because that's basically $6. And that means that each gallon is worth $3. That's more than $1 less than the price for 1 gallon. Even the half gallon for $2.10 is more because half of 3 is $1.50, and the quarter a gallon would be 75 cents.
10 seconds, Pete.
Yep. She finished by saying that she and her mom always shop together and they're always looking for the best deals. So